It doesn't matter how good you are at football, every player is capable of having a stinker under a certain manager, playing in a certain system, or at the wrong club. Just take Roberto Carlos, who won 125 caps for Brazil, played more than 500 games for Real Madrid, and is widely regarded as having been one of the finest left-backs of his generation. By almost any criteria then, Carlos was world-class, but in a single season at Inter Milan, in the 1995-96 season, he really struggled. In direct contrast to the free-flowing attacking football that Carlos had played in Brazil with Palmeiras and with the national team, Italian football at that time and Inter Milan manager Roy Hodgson were much more focused on solidity and offensive shape. As such, Carlos's energy and explosivity from fullback was wasted at the San Siro, where Hodgson even tried to play him on the left wing as an alternative, thus paving the way for his move to Madrid. Carlos is just one example of a world-class player who only ever performed badly at a single club. But today, as those of you who follow me on Twitter may well have been able to anticipate, we are going to be taking a look at 7 of the most notable examples. I am setting a pretty high bar, or a pretty low bar I suppose, for what constitutes having been terrible. So there will be no Di Maria at Manchester United, Crespo at Chelsea, or Henry at Juventus. Certainly, there won't be a place for Michael Owen at Newcastle United, who still performed well whenever he was fit, or Pierre-Emerick Aubameyang at Arsenal, as one very harsh critic suggested to me on Twitter, given that he was the Gunners' best player for at least 2.5 years. I'm also setting a pretty high bar for what constitutes world class, so there will be no Chris Sutton at Chelsea, Sebastian Haller at West Ham, or Leo Gamayo at Serie, all of whom are, or were, very good players, but not quite great players in my book. Finally, I won't be including any players who only ever played for 2 clubs, like Steven Gerrard, because I think that's a bit boring, nor will I be including any players who are still in the midst of their terrible spell at a single club, like Eden Hazard or Romelu Lukaku, simply because, theoretically, and however unlikely it may be, they could still turn things around. Right. Needlessly long introduction, 99% of which was just said to avoid confusion in the comments. Here are 7 world-class footballers who were terrible for just one club. 7th, Dennis Bergkamp. Watching Dennis Bergkamp play football was like watching Michelangelo sculpting a masterpiece or Mozart composing a symphony. Well, I imagine it would be. I have only witnessed one of those 3 things, which is Bergkamp playing football, but you get the idea. Football seemed to come so naturally to Bergkamp, and his grace and elegance with the ball at his feet was such that it is difficult to imagine that if you put him in any team, in any system, in any era, regardless of how effective he may or may not have been, you would still expect him to look absolutely brilliant. But, in actual fact, Bergkamp did experience grave difficulties with one of the only 3 teams that he ever represented. In the summer of 1993, having scored 30+ goals in each of his last 2 seasons at Ajax, Inter Milan paid £7.1 million to bring Dennis Bergkamp to Serie A. Bergkamp reportedly turned down offers from Real Madrid and Juventus to join the Nerazzurri, at least in part, because of promises that he was made about how the team would play and where he would fit in. Initially, manager Osvaldo Bagnoli kept true to his word, as Bergkamp played centrally alongside Ruben Sousa and Salvatore Schillaci in a front 3. Poor form prompted Bagnoli to shuffle the pack though, in terms of both his tactics and his personnel, before he lost his job. In Bergkamp's debut campaign, Inter slumped to a disastrous 13th place finish in the league, with the Dutchman only managing to score 8 goals. It was a completely different story in Europe, however, as Inter lifted the UEFA Cup and Bergkamp scored 8 goals in only 11 games. But there would be no redeeming features to his second and final season at the club. Struggling with injuries when the season began, Bergkamp came under fire for his attitude, his supposed lack of effort, and his refusal to appear in press conferences. The press branded him as a talentless flop, with one publication even renaming their Donkey of the Week segment as the Bergkamp of the Week. Bergkamp ended his second season at the San Siro with just 4 goals in 26 games, and over the summer, he joined Arsenal for £7.5 million, 3 times the price of the Gunners' previous record signing. Bergkamp went on to play more than 400 games for Arsenal over the next 11 years, where he was named as the club's second greatest player of all time, and where he now has a statue outside of the ground. A donkey, he most certainly was not, but a reminder that even the very best players don't always get things their own way. 6th, Rio Ferdinand. Someone recently took exception in the comments to me describing Rio Ferdinand in a video as having been world class. I know that term is as flexible as Simone Biles and is as open to interpretation as even the vaguest of religious texts. But to me, to be world class, you have to be good enough to get into a fictional worldwide 23-man squad and/or be one of the 2 or 3 best players in the world in your position. To my mind, Rio Ferdinand, at his peak, comfortably meets both of those criteria. And I have said on multiple occasions on this channel that I think he is the greatest defender of the Premier League era. For about 15 years, there was almost nothing Ferdinand couldn't do as a centre-back, in terms of his athleticism, his understanding of the game, and his ability with the ball at his feet. By the age of 23, Ferdinand had set the British record transfer fee twice as a centre-back. I'm not quite sure some people appreciate how absurd that is, and he went on to win every trophy on offer as one of Manchester United's star men over the course of 12 seasons at Old Trafford. Towards the end of his time at Old Trafford, injuries had become a more frequent occurrence for Ferdinand, and when his contract expired at the end of the 2013-14 season, he joined newly promoted Queen's Park Rangers, who were in the midst of giving an absolute masterclass on how not to run a football club following promotion to the Premier League. In September 2014, Ferdinand returned to Old Trafford, where his side were battered 4-0, and a month later, he announced his intention and excitement to retire at the end of the season. Ferdinand played just 12 games all season, 11 coming in the league, as QPR finished dead last, and he looked a shadow of his former self in every single one of them. On top of Ferdinand's struggles to stay fit, his late wife was also struggling with cancer treatment at the time, and tragically died at the end of that season. A reminder of the off-pitch issues that occupy players' lives that I covered in a recent video. I have never heard Ferdinand state it publicly, but I suspect he wishes he had just hung up his boots when his time at Manchester United came to an end. 5th, Juan Roman Riquelme. Juan Roman Riquelme was one of my favourite players growing up, and whilst there is a perception of him in Europe at least, in some quarters, that he was just a mercurial talent who played well in fits and starts before scuttling off back to South America, that is pure fiction. Riquelme made his name with Boca Juniors, and before he had even arrived in Europe, he had already reached a level that could reasonably be described as world-class, inspiring Boca 2 consecutive Libertadores titles in the year 2000 and again in 2001. Riquelme had been reluctant to leave Boca in the first place, but after his brother was kidnapped and he was forced to pay a hefty ransom, he decided to join Barcelona in 2002. Not only was Riquelme never dead set on the move, neither was his new coach Louis van Gaal, who described him as a political signing brought in not by him, but by the Barca leadership. Van Gaal didn't play with the number 10, so most of the time when Riquelme did feature, he was forced to play out wide. Anyone who recalls the genius of Juan Roman Riquelme knows that it was his touch, vision, and timing that made him so unplayable at his best. A little bit like Diego Maradona, but with a 50cc engine. So it is little wonder that he had such a horrible time in Catalonia. Pretty much everyone had a horrible time in Catalonia that season, it should be said, as Barcelona finished 6th in La Liga and went out in the first round of the Copa del Rey, leading to Van Gaal losing his job. Riquelme would still become one of the best midfield players in Europe for 3 seasons at Villarreal, as the club's talisman, during their rise from 15th to 3rd place in La Liga, before returning to Argentina to cement his legacy at Boca Juniors. Riquelme is one of Boca and Villarreal's greatest players of all time, and he was a 4-time Argentine Footballer of the Year, so his dreadful season at FC Barcelona made him a nailed-on inclusion in my 7. 4th, Ashley Cole. I mentioned one left-back during the introduction, Roberto Carlos, and another one features in this 7. More defensively astute than Carlos, Ashley Cole was the best left-back on the planet, I would argue, for the best part of 5 years, and therefore was undeniably world-class. A real teenage sensation at Arsenal, Cole was fast-tracked from the England under-21s to the first team by Sven-Göran Eriksson, winning his first cap for the Three Lions less than a year after he had made his Premier League debut. A superb offensive fullback who formed part of the most devastating left flank that the Premier League has ever seen at Highbury, Cole made a deeply controversial transfer to Chelsea in 2006. His attacking output decreased at Stamford Bridge under Jose Mourinho and his successors, but defensively, he became even more formidable. Following 8 years at Chelsea and 15 seasons in the Premier League in total, Cole joined Roma in the summer of 2014 on a 2-year deal. Things didn't really get off to a great start, as Cole turned into a meme after this post-training team photograph went viral online. Cole says that he did have friends at Roma, contrary to some suggestions, but there is no doubt that he played his worst football in the Italian capital. Arguably England's greatest ever left-back, Roma fans could be forgiven for failing to understand what all the fuss was about. And midway through his second season at the Stadio Olimpico, Cole's contract was prematurely terminated. Cole only ever played 16 games for Roma over the course of 18 months at the club. But in the same month that he was released, he joined LA Galaxy, where he played 94 times in 3 seasons, going on to captain the club and proving that he wasn't finished just yet. 3rd, Edwin van der Sar. One of world football's finest goalkeepers, during my lifetime at least, Edwin van der Sar was 6 foot 6 inches tall, he had great reflexes, he was a model professional, and his distribution and footwork were light years ahead of their time. Over a career spanning 21 years, during which time Van der Sar made 820 appearances at club level and won 130 caps for the Netherlands, he only ever played for 4 different teams. For 3 of them, or 4 if you include the Dutch national team, Van der Sar was one of, if not the greatest goalkeeper that they have ever had. At the other one, he is remembered only for a series of gaffes, errors, and embarrassing mistakes. Van der Sar joined Ajax's reserve team as a late developer in terms of turning professional, but he very quickly fought his way into the first team. In 8 seasons, Van der Sar played more than 300 games for Ajax, and he won both the Dutch and European Goalkeeper of the Year awards after Ajax lifted the Champions League in 1995. In 1999, despite interest from then European champions and treble winners Manchester United, Van der Sar decided to join Juventus for a fee of £5 million. His first season, contrary to popular opinion, was not a complete car crash. Van der Sar made more mistakes than he had done at Ajax, but Juventus still finished as Serie A runners-up with the best defensive record in the league. They would repeat both of those feats the following season, but for Van der Sar on a personal level, it would be a really difficult campaign. He made a flurry of uncharacteristic errors, the most notable of which led to Juventus drawing 2-2 with Roma rather than winning 2-1, who went on to win the league title 2 points ahead of them. Consequently, Van der Sar was blamed, by some people, for Juventus missing out on the Scudetto. Over the summer of 2001, Juventus signed Gianluigi Buffon for a massive world record fee for a goalkeeper, and Van der Sar made it clear that he wasn't willing to stay on as a number 2. Despite his difficult season, there was still shock throughout the world of football, given his prior accomplishments, when the Dutchman signed for Fulham. And the transfer turned out to be just as much as a coup for the Cottagers as it had initially seemed. Following 4 outstanding seasons in West London, Van der Sar joined Manchester United, becoming the club's first truly fitting replacement for Peter Schmeichel, and going on to play 266 times, winning 11 trophies in 6 seasons before retiring at the age of 40. Second, Romario. One of few professional footballers to have played to an even older age than Edwin van der Sar, that is especially impressive in the case of Romario, given that he was a striker who relied upon an incredible burst of speed over short distances during his prime. Romario, as I have often said on this channel, is the player who has played during my lifetime that I enjoy watching the most, and he is undoubtedly one of the greatest forwards and, indeed, footballers to have ever played the game. Incredibly complete, despite having a near total disdain for training, Romario's talent was such that, at his best, he could average a goal a game, his link-up play was inspired, and he could decide the outcome of a match with a simple drop of his shoulder. Given that Romario played for 9 different teams, the fact that he was brilliant for all but one of them speaks volumes about both his ability and longevity. The one exception was Adelaide United. Ironically, despite the fact that Romario must surely be the greatest player to have ever played professionally in Australia. It should be said that Romario's signing was always primarily a publicity stunt. On the verge of turning 41 at the time, Romario agreed a 6-game contract with Adelaide United, which was worth $250,000, fresh off the back of scoring 19 goals in 26 games for Miami FC in the United States. 2 of those games would be exhibition matches designed to raise the league's profile, whilst the other 4 would be competitive. Adelaide had topped the A-League the previous season and were looking to do so again. Romario came in during this crucial point of the season, supposedly unfit at the time, but manager John Kosmina was told that he had to play him for commercial and economic reasons regardless. Romario frequently failed to turn up for training, claiming that he was injured, and playing beach volleyball with his entourage on Australia's south coast instead. He scored just 1 goal in those 6 games, which was an aberration for Romario. He derailed Adelaide's season, at least in the mind of their head coach, who described Romario as finished and said that he had to change his entire setup to accommodate him. Despite his age, Romario scored 15 goals in 19 games the following season for Vasco da Gama, including his 1,000th career goal in his 4th and final stint with Vasco, suggesting that maybe he wasn't finished after all. Romario is now a politician who seemingly changes party, political affiliation, and ideological bent even more often than he changed clubs and direction during his playing days. First, Johan Cruyff. Is there something about Dutch players that makes them more likely to be world-class everywhere except for one club? I strongly suspect that there is not, because that would be weird and seemingly inexplicable, but there are 3 Dutchmen in this list of 7 from a country of fewer than 20 million people. And in top spot, it is the greatest Dutch footballer of all time, arguably the greatest European, and in some people's eyes, simply the greatest player to have ever lived. A superstar from the second that he first laced up a pair of boots and stepped foot on a football pitch, the most prolific season of Cruyff's career came during the mid-1960s, when he scored 41 goals in only 41 games for Ajax as a 19-year-old. In later years, the number of goals that he scored decreased, but his overall impact continued to increase, as Cruyff came to inspire Ajax to 3 successive European Cup triumphs before departing for Barcelona. In Catalonia, Cruyff redefined the purpose and identity of one of the biggest football clubs on the planet, as both a player and as a manager, so there are few people from the world of football to whom the term world-class would be more applicable. Cruyff played for 6 different teams in total, 7 if you count the Netherlands national team, and he is among the greatest players to have ever played for all but one of them. The exception to that rule being Levante, who Cruyff joined in 1981, having come close to joining Leicester City. According to some reports, Cruyff became the best paid player in European football when he returned to Spain, despite the fact that Levante competed in the Segunda Division. The club's president had taken out a bank loan to pay Cruyff's wages, banking on thousands of fans becoming members and paying him back. But it wouldn't quite work out like that. Whilst the move did create an enormous buzz, it also crippled Levante financially. Cruyff was entitled to 50% of the club's away gate receipts since it was assumed that most fans had only turned up to see him, and he was exempt from training sessions. Ultimately, tensions between Cruyff and the board led to him playing just 10 disappointing games for Levante before making a long-awaited return to Ajax. In 2 seasons back at Ajax, Cruyff won 2 Eredivisie titles and 1 double. And when he wasn't offered a new deal, insulted, he joined arch-rivals Feyenoord instead, where, in his last season in football, he won the double yet again and was named as the Dutch Footballer of the Year, aged 36. Unbelievable. Well, that is it for today's video, but I hope that you all enjoyed it. Hit the like button if that was the case. Let me know your thoughts down below in the comments, and make sure that you are subscribed and have notifications turned on for HITC Sevens. You can also find me, Alfie, on social media via the username at HITC Sevens on both Twitter and on Instagram. Cheers, and have a wonderful day.